I'll probably mispronounce some words today again, and I apologize for that. But I'm gonna continue reading where I left off. Francis. We were reading what Francis. Okay. And then there were a pair, boy and girl. I saw them together a great deal, and at first I thought they were boyfriend and girlfriend until one day I saw them up close and realized they had to be siblings. Later I learned they were twins. They looked very much alike, with heavy dark blonde hair and faces as clear, as cheerful and grave as a couple of Flemish angels. And perhaps most unusual in the context of Hampden, where pseudo-intellects and teenage decadence abounded, and where black clothing was the rigor. Okay. They liked to wear pale clothes, particularly white. In the swarm of cigarettes and dark sophistication, they appeared here and there like figures from an allegory, or long-dead celebrants from some forgotten garden party. It was easy to find out what they were, as they shared the distinction of being the only twins on campus. Their names were Charles and Camilla. All of them, to me, seemed highly unapproachable, but I watched them with interest whenever I happened to see them. Francis stooping to talk to a cat on a doorstep, Henry dashing past at the wheel of a little white car, with Julian in the passenger seat, Bunny leaning out of an upstairs window to yell something at the twins on the lawn below. Slowly more information came my way. Francis was from Boston, and from most accounts quite wealthy. Henry too was said to be wealthy. What's more, he was a linguistic genius. He spoke a number of languages, ancient and modern. He had published a translation of Anacreon with commentary when he was only 18. I found this out from George Lefroge, who was otherwise sour and reticent on the topic. Later I discovered that Henry, during his freshman year, had embarrassed Lefroge badly in front of the entire literature faculty. Excuse me. Who was otherwise sour and reticent on the topic. Later I discovered that Henry, during his freshman year, had embarrassed Lefroge badly in front of the entire literature faculty during the question and answer period of his annual lecture. The twins had an apartment off campus and were from somewhere down south, and Bunny had a habit of playing John Philip March tunes in his room at full volume late at night. Not to imply that I was overly preoccupied with any of this. I was settling in at school by this time. Classes had begun and I was busy with my work. My interest in Julian Moreau and his Greek pupils, though still keen, was starting to wane when a curious coincidence happened. It happened the Wednesday morning of my second week, when I was in the library making some Xeroxes for Dr. Rolland before my 11 o'clock class. After about 30 minutes, spots of light swimming in front of my eyes, I went back to the front desk to get the Xerox key to the librarian. As I turned to leave, I saw them, Bunny and the twins, sitting at a table that was spread with papers and pens and bottles of ink. The bottles of ink I remember particularly because I was very charmed by them and by the long black straight pens, which looked incredibly archaic and troublesome. Charles was wearing a white tennis sweater and Camilla's sundress with sailor collar and a straw hat. Bunny's tweed jacket was slung across the back of his chair, exposing several large rips and stains in the lining. He was leaning his elbow on the table, hair in eyes. His rumpled shirt sleeves held up with striped garters. Their heads were close together and they were talking quietly. I suddenly wanted to know what they were saying. I went to the bookshelf behind their table a long way, as if I wasn't sure what I was looking for. All the way down until I was so close I could have reached out and touched Bunny's arm. Bunny's arm. Nice. My back to them, I picked a book at random, ridiculous sociological text as it happened, pretended to study the index, secondary analysis, secondary deviance, secondary groups, secondary schools. I don't know about that, Camilla was saying. If the Greeks are sailing to Carthage, it should be accusative. Remember? Place whither, that's the rule. Can't be. This was Bunny. His voice was nasal, garrulous, W.C. Fields with a bad case of Long Island lockjaw. It's not place whither, it's place to. Put my money on the ablative case. There was a confused rattling of papers. Wait, said Charles. Wait. There was a confused rattling of papers. His voice was, said Charles, his voice was a lot like his sister's, hoarse, slightly southern. Look at this. They're not just sailing to Carthage, they're sailing to attack it. You're crazy. No, they are. Look at the next sentence. We need a dative. Are you sure? More rustling of papers. Absolutely. I don't see how, said Bunny. You sound like Thurston Howell on ablative's the ticket. The hard ones are always ablative. A slight pause. Bunny, said Charles, you're mixed up. The ablative is in Latin. Well, of course, I know that, said Bunny irritably, after a confused pause which seemed to indicate the contrary. But you know what I mean. Look, Charles, this dative won't work. Yes, it will. They're sailing to attack, aren't they? Yes, but the Greeks sailed over the sea to Carthage. Well, we can attack and still use epi, but we have to use an accusative because of the first rules. Segregation, self-concept. I looked down at the index and racked my brains for the case they were looking for. The Greeks sailed over the sea to Carthage, place whither, place whence, Carthage. Suddenly something occurred to me. I closed the book and put it on the shelf, turned around. Excuse me, I said. Immediately they stopped talking, startled, and turned to stare at me. I'm sorry, but what did the locative case do? Locative, said Charles. Charles looked at his paper, then at me. Locative, he said. That's pretty obscure. Are you sure it exists for Carthage? I hadn't thought of this. Maybe not, I said. I know it does for Athens. Charles reached over and held the lexicon towards him or the table and began to leaf through it. Oh hell, don't bother. If you don't have to decline it and doesn't need a preposition, it sounds good to me. He reared back in his chair and looked up at me. I'd like to shake your hand, stranger, offered it to him, clasped and shook it firmly, almost knocking an ink bottle over with his elbow as he did so. Glad to meet you. Yes, he said, reaching up with the other hand to brush the hair from his eyes. I was confused by the sudden glare of attention. It was as if the characters in a favorite painting, absorbed in their own concerns, had looked about of the canvas and spoken to me. Only the day before, Francis and a swish of black cashmere and cigarette smoke had brushed past me in the corridor. For a moment, as his arm touched mine, he was a creature of flesh and blood, but the next he is a hallucination again, figment of the imagination, stalking down the hallway, as heedless of me, as ghosts in their shadowy rounds are said to be heedless of the living. Charles, still fumbling with the lexicon, rose and offered his hand. My name is Charles Richard Papin. Oh, you're the one, said Camilla suddenly. What? You came by to ask about the Greek class. This is my sister, and this is Bun. Did you tell him your name already? No, don't think so. You made me a happy man, sir. We had 10 more like this to do and 5 minutes to do them in. Edmund Crooker is the name, said Bunny, grasping my hand again. How long have you studied Greek? Said Camilla. 2 years. You're really good at it. Pity you aren't in our class. Strained silence. Well, said Charles uncomfortably, Julian is funny about things like that. Go see him again, why don't you? Bunny said. Take him some flowers and tell him you love Play-Doh and he'll be eating out of your hand. Another silence. This one from disagreeable. This one more disagreeable than the first. Camilla smiled, not exactly at me. Sweet, unfocused smile, quite impersonal, as if I were a waiter or a clerk in a store. Beside her, Charles was still standing, smiled too, and raised a polite eyebrow, a gesture which might have been nervous, might have meant anything really, but which it took to mean, is that all? I mumbled something and was about to turn away when Bunny, who was staring in the opposite direction, shot out an arm and grabbed me by the wrist. Wait, he said. Startled, I looked up. Henry had just come in the door, dark suit, umbrella and all. When he got to the table, he pretended not to see me. Hello, he said to them. Are you finished? Bunny tossed his head at me. Look here, Henry. We have got someone to meet you, he said. Henry glanced up. His expression did not change. He shut his eyes and then reopened them, as if he found it extraordinary that someone such as myself should stand in his path of vision. Yes, this man's name is Richard. Richard what? Papin. Yes, Richard Papin. Studies Greek. Henry brought his head up to look at me. Not here, surely. He said no. I said, meeting his gaze, but his stare was so rude I was forced to cut my eyes away. Oh, Henry, look at this, would you? Said Charles, hastily rustling through the papers again. We're going to use a dative or an accusative here, but he suggested look at it. Henry leaned over his shoulder and inspected the page. Archaic, look at it, he said. Very Homeric, of course. It would be grammatically correct, but perhaps a bit off contextually. He brought his head back up to scrutinize me. The light was at an angle and glinted off his tiny spectacles, and I couldn't see his eyes behind them. Very interesting. You're a Homeric scholar? I might have said yes, but I had the feeling he would be glad to catch me in a mistake, and that he would be able to do it easily. I like Homer, I said weakly. He regarded me with chilled distance. I love Homer, he said. Of course, you're studying things rather more modern, Plato and the tragedians and so forth. I was trying to think of some response, and he looked away in disinterest. We should go, he said. Charles shuffled his papers together, stood up again. Camilla stood beside him. And this time she offered me her hand too. Side by side, they were very much alike, and similarity less of than a manner and bearing, a correspondence of gesture which bounced and echoed between them, so that a blink seemed to reverberate moments later in a twitch of the other's eyelid. Their eyes were the same color of gray, intelligent and calm. She, I thought, was very beautiful in an unsettling, almost medieval way, which would not be apparent to the casual observer. Bunny pushed his chair back and slid me between the shoulder blades. Well, sir, we must get together sometime and talk about Greek. Yes. Goodbye, Henry said with a nod. They strolled off, and I stood where I was and watched them go, walking out of the library in a wide phalanx, side by side. When I went by Dr. Rollins' office a few minutes later to drop off the Xeroxes, I asked him if he could give me an advance on my work study check. He leaned back in his chair and trained his watery red-rimmed eyes on me. Well, for the past 10 years, I've made it my practice not to do that. Let me tell you why that is. I know, sir, I said hastily. Dr. Rollins' discourses on his practices could sometimes take half an hour more. I understand, only it's kind of an emergency. He leaned forward again and cleared his throat. And what might that be? His hands folded on the desk before him were gnarled with veins and had bluish, pearly sheen around the knuckles. I stared at them. I needed $10 or $20, needed it badly, but I had come in without first deciding what to say. I don't know, I said. Something has come up. He furrowed his eyebrows impressively. Dr. Rollins' senile manner was said to be a facade. To me, it seemed quite genuine, but sometimes when you were off your guard, he would display an unexpected flash of lucidity, which, though it frequently did not relate to the topic at hand, was evidence that rational processes rumbled somewhere in the muddy depth of his consciousness. It's my car, I said, suddenly inspired. I didn't have a car. I need to get it fixed. I had not expected him to inquire further, but instead he perked up noticeably. What's the trouble? Something with the transmission. Is it dual patched? Air cooled, I said, shifting to the other foot. Did not care for this conversational turn. I don't know a thing about cars, and I'm hard pressed to change a tire. What have you got? One of those little V6 numbers? Yes, I'm not surprised. All the kids seem to crave them. I had no idea how to respond to this. He pulled out his desk drawer and began to pick things up and bring them close to his eye and put them back in again. Once the transmission goes, in my experience, the car is gone, especially in a V6. You might as well take that vehicle to the junk heap. Now, myself, I've got a 98 Regency, 10 years old. With me, it's regular checkups, new filter every 1,500 miles, and new oil every 3,000. Runs like a dream. Watch out for these garages in town, he said sharply. Pardon? He'd found his checkbook at last. Well, you ought to go to the bursar, but I guess this will be all right. Well, he said, opening it and beginning to write laboriously. Some of these places in Hamden, they find out you're from the college, they'll charge you double. Redeemed repair is generally the best. There are a bunch of born-agains down there, but they'll still shake you down pretty good if you don't keep an eye on them. He tore out the check and handed it to me. I glanced at it and my heart skipped a beat. $200. He had signed it and everything. Don't you let them charge you a penny more, he said. No, sir, I said, barely able to conceal my joy. What would I do with all this money? Maybe he would even forget he had given it to me. He pulled down his glasses, looked at me over the tops of them. That's Redeemed Repair, he said. They're out on Highway 6. The sign is shaped like a cross. Thank you, I said. I walked down the hall with spirits soaring and $200 in my pocket. The first thing I did was to go downstairs to the payphone and call a cab to take me into Hamden Town. If there's one thing I'm good at, it's lying on my feet. It's sort of a gift I have. And what did I do in Hamden Town? Frankly, I was too staggered by my good fortune to do much of anything. It was a glorious day. I was sick of being poor, so before I thought better of it, I went into an expensive men's shop on the square and bought a couple of shirts. Then I went down on the Salvation Army, poked around in bins for a while, found a Harris Street overcoat and a pair of brown wingtips that fit me. Almost some cufflinks and funny old tie that had pictures of men hunting deer on it. When I came out of the store, I was happy to find that I still had nearly $100. Should I go to the bookstore, to the movies, buy a bottle of scotch? In the end, I was so swarmed by the flock of possibilities that drifted, murmuring and smiling to crowd about me on the bright autumn sidewalk that, like a farm boy, flustered by a bevy of. I brushed right through them to the payphone on the corner to call a cab to take me to school. Once in my room, I spread the clothes on my bed. Cufflinks were beaten up and had someone else's initials on them, but they looked like real gold, glinting in the drowsy autumn sun which poured through the window and soaked in yellow pools on the oak floor. Voluptuous, rich, intoxicating. I had a feeling of deja vu that when the next afternoon Julian answered the door exactly as he had the first time, by opening it only a crack and looking through it rarely, as if there were something wonderful in his office that needed guarding, something that he was careful not everyone should see. It was a feeling I would come to know well in the next month. Even now, years later and far away, sometimes in dreams, I find myself standing before that white door, waiting for him to appear like the gatekeeper in a fairy story. Ageless, watchful, sly as a child. When he saw it was me, he opened the door slightly wider than he had the first time. "Mr. Pepin again, isn't it?" he said. I didn't bother to correct him. "I'm afraid so." He looked at me for a moment. "You have a wonderful name, he said. "There were kings of France named Pepin. Are you busy now?" "I'm never too busy for an heir to the French throne, if that is in fact what you are." "I'm afraid not." He laughed and quoted a little Greek epigram about honesty being a dangerous virtue, and to my surprise, opened the door and ushered me in. It was a beautiful room, not an office at all, and much bigger than it looked from outside. Airy and white, with high ceiling and breeze fluttering in the starched curtains. In the corner near a low bookshelf was a big round table littered with teapots and Greek books, and there were flowers everywhere. Roses and carnations and anemones on his desk and on the table in the windowsills. The roses were especially fragrant. Their smell hung rich and heavy in the air, mingled with the smell of bergamot and black china tea and a faint inky scent of camphor. Breathing deep, I felt intoxicated. Everywhere I looked was something beautiful: oriental rugs, porcelains, tiny paintings like jewels, a dazzle of fractured color that struck me as if I had stepped into one of those little Byzantine churches that are so plain on the outside, inside the most paradisal painted eggshell of glidden disarray. He sat in an armchair by the window and motioned for me to sit too. "I suppose you have come by the Greek class?" he said. "Yes." His eyes were kind, frank, more grey than blue. "It's rather late in the term," he said. "I would like to study it again. It seems a shame to drop it after 2 years." He arched his eyebrows, deep, mischievous, and looked at his folded hands for a moment. "I'm told you're from California." "Yes, I am. I don't know many people from the West. I don't know if I would like it here. I would like it there. What do you do in California?" I gave him the spiel: orange groves, failed movie stars, lamplit cocktail hours by the swimming pools, cigarettes on way. He listened, his eyes fixed on mine, apparently entranced by these fraudulent recollections. Never had my efforts met with such attentiveness, such keen solicitude. He seemed so utterly enthralled that I was tempted to embroider a little more than perhaps was prudent. "How thrilling," he said warmly, when I, half euphoric, was finally played out. "How very romantic." "Well, we're all quite used to it out there, you see," I said. trying not to fidget, flushed with the brilliance of my success. And what does a person with such a romantic temperament seek in the study of the classics? He asked this as if having had the good fortune to catch such a rare bird as myself, he was anxious to extract my opinion while I was still captive in his office. If by romantic you mean solitary and introspective, I said, I think romantics are frequently the best classicists. He laughed. The great romantics are often failed classicists, but that's beside the point, isn't it? What do you think of Hamden? Are you happy here? I provided an exegesis. Sorry about that again. Not as brief as it might have been of why at the moment I found the college satisfactory for my purposes. Young people often find the country a bore, which is not to say that it is not good for them. Have you traveled much? Tell me what it was that attracted you to this place. I should think a young man such as yourself would be at loss outside the city, but perhaps you feel tired of city life. Is that so? So skillfully and engagingly that I was quite disarmed. He led me deftly from topic to topic, and I'm sure that in this talk, which seemed only a few minutes but was really much longer, he managed to extract everything but me wanted to know. I did not suspect that his rapt interest might spring from anything less than the very richest enjoyment of my own company, and though I found myself talking with relish on a bewildering variety of topics, some of them quite personal and with more frankness than was customary. I was convinced that I was acting of my own volition. I wish I could remember more of what was said that day. Actually, I do remember much of what I said, most of it too fatuous for me to recall with pleasure. The only point at which he differed, aside from an incredulous eyebrow raised at my mention of Picasso when I came to know him better, I realized that he must have thought this an absolute, almost personal affront, was on the topic of psychology, which is after all heavy on my mind, working for Dr. Rollin and everything. But do you really think, he said, that one can call psychology a science? Certainly. What else is it? But even Plato knew that class and conditioning and so forth have an inalterable effect on the individual. It seems to me that psychology is only another word for what ancients call fate. Psychology is a terrible word. He agreed vigorously. Yes, it is terrible, isn't it? He said, but with an expression that indicated that he thought it rather tasteless of me even to use it. Perhaps in certain ways it is helpful. It is helpful construct in talking about a certain kind of mind. Country people who live around me are fascinating because their lives are so closely bound to fate that they really are predestined. But I'm afraid my students are never very interesting to me because I always know exactly what they are going to do. I was charmed by his conversation, and despite its illusion of being rather modern and digressive, to me, the hallmark of the modern mind is that it loves to wander from the subject. I now see that he was leading me by circumlocution to the same points again and again. For if the modern mind is whimsical and discursive, the classical mind is narrow, unhesitating, relentless, which is not a quality of intelligence that one encounters frequently these days. But though I can digress with the best of them, I am nothing in my soul if not obsessive. We talked a while longer and presently fell silent. After a moment, Jolene said, courteously, if you'd like, I would be happy to take you as pupil, my Mr. Papin. I, looking out the window and having half forgotten why I was there, turned to gape at him, couldn't think of a thing to say. However, before you accept, there are a few conditions to which you must agree. What? Will you go to the registrar's office tomorrow and put in a request to change counselors? He reached for a pen and a cup on his desk. Amazingly, it was full of Mont Blanc fountain pens. At least a dozen of them. Quickly wrote out a note and handed it to me. Don't lose it, because the registrar never assigns me consulees unless I request them. The note was written in masculine, rather 19th century hand with Greek ease. The ink was still wet, but I have a counselor. It's my policy never to accept a pupil unless I am his counselor as well. Other members of the literature faculty disagree with my teaching methods, and you will run into problems if someone else gains the power to veto my decisions. You should pick up some drop ad forms as well. I think you're going to have to drop all the classes you're currently taking except the French, which would be as well for you to keep. You appear to be deficient in the area of modern languages. I was astonished. I can't drop all my classes. Why not? Registration is over. That doesn't matter at all. The classes that I want you to pick up will be with me. You'll probably be taking 3 or 4 classes with me per term for the rest of your time here. I looked at him. No wonder he had only 5 students. But how can I do that? I said.